Welcome to today's deep dive. This story about Melissa and her journey through addiction and recovery is really powerful. Um, what strikes me is how it brings to light some really important things about addiction and the importance of support, like especially professional help. What about you? What do you think is the most valuable thing that we can take away from Melissa's experience?
It's interesting. What struck me most was how Melissa's story actually begins. It wasn't like the sudden crash. It was more like this gradual descent into some pretty risky behavior. Starting with like drug use, especially weed, even being offered harder drugs at times. That sort of slow decline, it can be so tricky because it masks the seriousness of the situation, for both the person going through it and the people around them.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like it's so easy to just dismiss those early warning signs as like, oh, it's just a phase or typical teenage rebellion. But Melissa's story really shows us just how important early intervention can be. So like thinking about that, what sort of early interventions could have been helpful in a situation like hers?
Well, there are actually a lot of different approaches. Family counseling, for instance, that could have helped, address any underlying issues and maybe improve communication. There are also like support groups specifically for teenagers who are experimenting with substances. Those groups can be a safe space for, sharing and learning from each other. And then, of course, if there are any signs of mental health concerns like depression or anxiety, getting a professional evaluation and treatment is like absolutely crucial. The key is to remember that addiction is often a symptom of something much deeper, and it's really about addressing those root causes.
It makes you wonder, if things could have been different for Melissa if those early signs had been addressed right away. Like her mom talks about these noticeable changes she saw, like weight loss, not taking care of her appearance, withdrawing from school and her friends, not to mention those unpredictable mood swings. It really makes you think about the impact it must have had on her family.
Oh, absolutely. Addiction doesn't just affect the person struggling with it. It really has this ripple effect. It causes a lot of fear and anxiety and a sense of helplessness among loved ones. It's not uncommon for them to wrestle with guilt, constantly questioning what they could have done differently. They just feel so powerless to stop this downward spiral.
You can definitely feel that in the testimonial.
Yeah.
It's clear that Melissa's mom was deeply concerned for her safety, especially knowing the company she was keeping. People who, as the source material puts it, had little care for her well-being. Do you think that social circle played a role in her addiction?
Sadly, yes. That's a pattern we see a lot with addiction. Individuals often end up isolating themselves, surrounding themselves with people who enable the behavior. This creates this sort of dangerous echo chamber. It reinforces those negative patterns and makes it even harder for loved ones to really intervene effectively.
And, like in Melissa's case, that isolation was made even worse by the fact that she was living with her grandmother, who was estranged from her mother. It seems like a lot of difficult circumstances were coming together all at once.
But here's what's really interesting. Despite that strained relationship, Melissa's mother and grandmother, they recognized how serious things were, and they put their differences aside to help her. They both understood that her well-being was far more important than any past conflicts. It was that decision, to seek professional help together that marked a turning point in Melissa's journey.
That unity is so powerful. It's a real testament to the strength of family, even when facing such adversity. What made them choose Addiction Rehab Toronto? Was there something specific about that facility that drew them in?
They were drawn to Addiction Rehab Toronto because it has this reputation for being very compassionate and having a really individualized approach. Like, the facility really focuses on building trust and making it a safe space for healing. And that was really important given, how sensitive Melissa's situation was. And they also liked that they really emphasize family involvement.
So it was more than just getting her into treatment. It was about creating this, whole support system.
Exactly, because addiction really affects the whole family. And healing is so much more effective when loved ones are actually involved. So Addiction Rehab Toronto really encourages open communication. They help families understand the dynamics of addiction, and they give them tools and strategies to actually support their loved one's recovery.
And it sounds like Melissa really thrived there. The testimonial talks about how quickly she started changing. She was smiling more, being more open and talkative, and she was expressing gratitude. Those might seem like small things, but I feel like they really show how much she was transforming internally, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those kinds of changes really reflect, A real shift in her mindset and her emotional state. Like being in a structured and supportive environment like that, it removes a lot of those triggers and provides a sense of that addiction affects every part of a person. And so recovery is really about restoring wholeness.
Her mom also mentions how thankful Melissa was and how she was eager to learn from the counselors about addiction and recovery.
Yeah.
She actually started engaging in therapy and exploring family issues and learning about communication skills and healthy choices. I'm curious, what kind of therapeutic approaches do they typically use in a place like that?
Well, there's really no one-size-fits-all approach. Treatment plans are really tailored to each individual's needs. So it might include individual therapy, group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, family therapy. They might even explore alternative therapies like art or music therapy. The goal is really to help people understand their addiction
Hmm.
and then develop coping mechanisms, address those underlying emotional issues, and build a foundation for lasting change.
Yeah, and the source material really emphasizes how positive the staff's approach was at Addiction Rehab Toronto. Melissa's mom actually specifically says that they treated her with value, care, and respect, which I imagine is crucial for building trust, especially with someone who's probably feeling really vulnerable and ashamed.
Right, exactly. Building a strong therapeutic relationship that's based on empathy and respect is just essential. When people feel safe, heard, and understood, they're more likely to open up, really engage in the process, and embrace the journey of recovery. It's really about empowering them to take charge of their own healing.
And it sounds like that sense of empowerment was a turning point for Melissa. She started taking responsibility for her actions and actually expressed a desire to, mend relationships, especially with her mom. That must have been so meaningful for both of them.
Absolutely, because addiction so often leads to guilt and shame and, broken trust. So taking ownership of what you've done and actually wanting to repair those bonds is a huge indicator of progress. It really signifies a shift from, self-destruction to self-healing and a real desire to rebuild a life that's based on healthy connections.
And her mom also noticed some positive changes physically, like Melissa regained some of the weight she had lost. And she started taking pride in her appearance again. It's a good reminder that recovery is not just an internal process. It manifests in how we present ourselves to the world, too.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming your sense of self-worth and taking control. Because addiction often strips away a person's identity and they're left feeling lost and broken. So recovery is really about piecing yourself back together, rediscovering who you are, and presenting that renewed self to the world.
It's great to know that she was also making friends at the center and felt comfortable sharing in the group sessions. That sense of community and belonging must have been really important for her healing.
Oh, definitely. Peer support is incredibly valuable when it comes to recovery. Knowing that you're not alone, being able to share experiences and learn from other people who've been through similar things creates such a strong sense of solidarity and hope. It really provides a space to be vulnerable, to encourage each other, and to hold each other accountable. It's like finding this new family that really gets it, the unique challenges of addiction and recovery.
There's this really powerful detail in the source material where it says that Melissa confided everything to a counselor. That level of trust and vulnerability is huge. What does that tell you about how deeply she was engaging in the therapeutic work?
It shows that she had gotten to this place of real self-reflection and emotional honesty. Because being able to process past traumas, share your deepest experiences, and receive empathetic support, that's essential for healing. It
Yeah.
allows you to confront the root causes of your addiction, let go of the pain you've been carrying, and start rebuilding your life based on authenticity and self-acceptance.
And it sounds like Addiction Rehab Toronto took a really holistic approach. They involved Melissa's mom and grandmother in the process. They really felt like part of the team, which probably helped solidify those family bonds, right?
Absolutely. Family involvement is just crucial. Addiction affects everyone, and healing really works best when loved ones are actively involved. By being part of therapy sessions, learning about addiction, and coming up with strategies to support their loved one, families can play a huge role in the healing process.
The source material mentions that as Melissa's graduation date got closer, she had these mixed emotions. Sadness about leaving this amazing community she had built, but also excitement and hope about actually applying what she'd learned to her life back home.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that people face when they're transitioning out of that structured treatment environment?
Yeah, it really is like walking a tightrope. You have that feeling of freedom, but then there's that fear of slipping back into old habits.
So what can someone like Melissa do to make that transition easier? How can they make sure they don't fall?
Well, you've hit on something really important there. Leaving that structured environment of treatment, it can be really daunting. Suddenly you're faced with all these real-world triggers and temptations, but without that constant support you had in rehab. That's why having an aftercare plan is so important.
So it's not just about completing the program, it's about what happens next.
Exactly. Aftercare could involve things like ongoing therapy, support group meetings, maybe even a sober living arrangement or volunteer work. It's all about finding those healthy ways to fill the void that was left by substance use and, really build a life that supports long-term sobriety.
And it seems like Melissa was really committed to that ongoing support. She was going to those weekly aftercare sessions for months after leaving treatment. That really shows how dedicated she was to her recovery.
Right.
So what are the benefits of sticking with those support systems? Why is that so important long term?
Well, those connections provide accountability. They offer encouragement and a sense of belonging, all of which are so crucial for staying on track. Going to those meetings regularly, sharing your experiences, and learning from others who are maybe a little further along in their recovery. That can be incredibly empowering, and it can really help to prevent relapse.
And 7 months later, Melissa's mom said she's still staying away from drugs, and she's kept up with the people she met in treatment. That really says a lot about how effective the treatment was and how important that ongoing support network is.
It really does. Melissa's story offers a lot of hope for anyone who's struggling with addiction. It shows that recovery isn't just possible, but that it can last with the right combination of professional help, personal commitment, and a strong support system.
Her mom said, "I am so happy as her mother to have Melissa back." It just really captures that profound relief and joy that comes with recovery, not just for the person going through it, but for their whole family. It shows how healing can mend those broken bonds and restore hope.
It's a beautiful reminder that addiction doesn't have to define your life or, tear families apart. With the right support, people can reclaim their lives, they can rebuild relationships, and they can create a future filled with purpose and meaning.
Thinking back on this journey, what stands out to you the most? What's the one thing you're hoping our listeners take away from Melissa's story?
I think what resonates most with me is the resilience of the human spirit. Melissa faced incredible challenges, and yet she found the strength to change her life. Her story is a powerful reminder that even when things seem their darkest, hope is never truly lost, and transformation is always possible. If you're listening to this, and you or someone you love is struggling with addiction, please remember that you're not alone. There's help available, and recovery is within reach.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into this personal and incredibly moving story. Melissa's journey reminds us how important compassion, understanding, and support are for anyone facing any kind of challenge, big or small.